Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Live at the Waterhole on this wonderful Monday morning. So we're starting today at Moela Safari Lodge in Botswana. My name is Johanna Herbst. I'm the owner of this voice, and I'll be your presenter for today. Just a quick reminder that this is a live and interactive experience, so we love to hear from you. So send us your comments or questions through our app or website. The details are displayed on the screen below. So today I'd like to find out a bit more about you. When you head out into nature, whether it's a weekend camping trip, a long hike, or a safari drive, what is the one item that you simply can't go without? For some of you, it might be a trusty Leatherman that can fix almost anything. For others, it's a pair of binoculars to scan the bush for birds and hidden wildlife. And for the real nature nerds, it might be a well-worn field guide on trees. So what is the most important item you take with you into the wild, and why? It might say more about you than you think, so let's unpack it and maybe even discover a few new essentials along the way. So it looks like we just have a lone elephant in picture over here. You can't really see the water too well, but it looks like it's just enjoying a bit of water over there. So if you had to ask me what my sort of trusty item is that I always take with me, it would definitely be my Leatherman, because you never know what could happen in the bush. So let's quickly link to Old Donyo and see what's happening over there. Okay, beautiful big male giraffe, it would seem, in picture over here. Definitely not the busiest we've seen Old Donyo's waterhole before. So Mr. Elemental says, hello, owner of the voice. Thank you very much, Mr. Elemental, for commenting and for welcoming me. I'm very excited to be back. It's been quite a while. It's been just under a month that I haven't done the show. And so the reason being, I've been with my head in the books. Been studying very hard. I've just completed my exams for my PGCE, which is a postgraduate certificate in education. So that will qualify me to also go into teaching. So hopefully I can then one day impart my knowledge of the bush and my enthusiasm and passion for the bush onto the next generation. So that's why I've been a bit MIA. But I'm very, very excited to be back today and excited to hear your stories and your comments and questions. Sorry, I just experienced a bit of a technical issue, but hopefully it's resolved now. So Mira says, is a wide brim hat a non-negotiable? And I would definitely say so, because the African sun can be relentless, and I've got a very fair skin, so it's definitely a non-negotiable for me. Although I've been told I don't really suit hats, but yeah, definitely you're not going to the bush to win a fashion competition, so definitely a hat and some sunscreen would be a non-negotiable. So Mr. Elemental says, I tried to take my wits with me when I go to the bush. So thanks for that comment, Mr. Elemental. That's also definitely a non-negotiable. You can never become too complacent in the bush, where there's all sorts of dangers and surprises lurking around every corner. But definitely if you have your wits about you, you can be prepared for any eventuality. So Jax says, is asking, what about bug spray? So definitely, especially this time of year, in the summer in southern Africa and the rest of, or sort of East Africa, it's a non-negotiable, an essential item, because the mosquitoes and the midges and the flies can just become such a nightmare. So definitely some bug spray. Also, it becomes very difficult to sleep at night time, listening to the chorus of mosquitoes singing for you while you go to sleep. Okay, so this giraffe wants to go about its merry way. Let's see what's going on at Tau Lodge. So it looks like we've got some knob-billed duck here in picture. Here on at the Tau waterhole on the Madikwe Game Reserve in the northwest of South Africa, northwestern province. So you can see the female on the left and then the male on the right. You can tell the difference by looking at that sort of growth on its beak, on its bill. So that big knob, hence the name knob-billed duck. So the males have that knob, and that's in order to look more charming to the females. So it's a way of attracting females. Sorry, it seems that just experiencing a bit of a technical difficulty still, but let's carry on. Let's see if it works now. So Leonie says, I will make sure to take one of you guys with me. Then I know I will be safe. Thanks for this lovely show. So thank you very much for your comment, Leonie. Definitely it helps to have someone who's knowledgeable about the bush and who knows when to or how to look out for danger or what to look out for. So it definitely helps to have someone knowledgeable with you, someone experienced. So Amadi is asking, can a multi-tool fix most camp snaffs? I'm not sure what you mean by snaffus, but definitely the multi-tool, like a Leatherman, can. I know for me it works wonders. It's such a useful thing to have when you're in the bush. You're able to cut through wire, and if there's potentially an animal caught in a snare, or even if you'd have to pull a nail out of a wheel, out of a tire, if you've got a puncture, and there's lots of different uses. Or if you have to pull, let's say, a sharp thorn out of your shoe, which is maybe poking your foot. There's just an endless amount of uses for a multi-tool, and most game rangers wouldn't go anywhere without it. So Econ is asking, is a safari scarf or neck saver or style flex? So I think you mean, so is a scarf necessary for game drive? And yes, I would suggest it, especially on a winter's day, a winter's morning or evening, because it gets very chilly or especially where I was guiding just to the west of Kruger National Park, and within the Kruger, it can get very, very chilly in the mornings in the winter. But in the summer, it's a completely different story. But also in the winter, the days are very pleasant and very warm, sometimes hotter than most European days in the summer. Okay, so I've got a bit of clarification on what snaffus is. So it's a mess or an issue, and definitely a multi-tool will be able to fix most messes or issues, especially when you're running a lodge or as a guide or a reserve manager. Definitely don't want to go anywhere without it, because you can't always carry a big toolbox with you when you're going around in the bush. Okay, let's have a look at what's happening at Moela Lodge. We just caught a glimpse of that crocodile just before linking through to Moela, but I'm sure we'll go back to him in a moment. But let's just have a look at these wonderful elephants that are just enjoying a bit of a mud bath on quite a warm day at Moela Lodge. I see along the Boteti River it's 28 degrees, a maximum of 28 degrees, and quite sunny. So not the hottest it gets there, along the Boteti River, but definitely warm enough to warrant a nice little cool off from the elephants. Isn't it just amazing how they use their trunks to suck up all that water and spray it on their bodies? It's like a vacuum cleaner of sorts. And they can store about 6 liters, depending on the size of the elephant, 6 liters of water before releasing it, spraying it onto their bodies, or putting it in their mouths. So Jasmine has a very interesting comment over here. Jasmine says, I was always told to take a journal with me. Best thing I ever did. It's difficult to remember every little thing. So I think that's an excellent thing to have, a journal. When I first started guiding, I definitely was a lot better at writing down the sightings of the day and all the highlights and the lowlights of the day, but unfortunately I became a lot busier and I didn't stick to it as religiously as I used to. So, but definitely I'm looking at reflecting a lot more with my guiding and teaching. So definitely it's important to always reflect on what you've seen in the bush, and that's the best way you make those connections between what you already know and what you've just learned. To go back to Econ's question about whether you should take a scarf on safari, I would definitely suggest bringing a buff with, I always pack a buff in my backpack whenever I go on a safari or go out in nature. You just never know when you could need it. If, for example, you're going on a game drive and it gets very dusty, you can put your buff around your mouth and your nose to cover your mouth and nose against the dust, and also it can protect your neck against the sun. And then also, if by chance you happen to stumble across a fire, which I hope you never will, but it can be very useful to protect your nostrils and your mouth from smoke inhalation. So definitely a very nice thing to have, a sort of a buff, which is kind of like a little scarf, which is quite elastic. So Dara is asking how many buffs for dust, sweat, and sun. So definitely you could pack 3 different buffs, because they do get very sweaty and dusty and dirty. So it might be useful to pack a few buffs, to have a few buffs on hand.
this unfolds in front of you. What does it take to handle the wild? Balance. Determination. Focus.
Yaku!
And gear that can take a beating so you don't have to.
The bush, full of beauty, wonder, and absolute chaos. And now, all that madness has its own show. It's called a Wild Bush Week. The countdown of the most outrageous, heart-stopping, and sometimes downright ridiculous wildlife moments of the week. Lions throwing their weight around. Hyenas gate-crashing the buffet. Leopards doing, well, leopardy things. Each week, it's a fresh reel of safari gold, a mix of drama,
She's just got an impala, everybody.
danger, and a healthy dose of laughter. So, if you fancy a highlight show with bite, and I don't mean just the animals, tune in to a Wild Bush Week. You bring the tea, and we'll bring the tusks, tails, and teeth.
Looks like we've got two white rhino in the foreground, and then we've got what looks like a zebra and perhaps a blesbok in the background. And then we've got, of course, our trusty oxpeckers, which are feasting off the ticks of the rhino. And I've said this before on the show, but what I find is a really lovely fact is that the Swahili name for the rhino is Askari wa Kifaru, which translates to the rhino's guard. So these oxpeckers, there's sort of an alarm system for the rhinos. So they're always on the lookout for any potential threats to the rhino, even though the rhino doesn't have too many predators, but nonetheless they can fall victim to an attack by a lion, especially the younger rhinos. So these birds then just alert them of any cats, maybe big cats, or perhaps a snake, or maybe perhaps another rhino. So a nice sort of built-in alarm system, you can call it that. Or an added attachment which you can purchase. I actually got a nice pair of oxpecker socks the other day as a gift from my soon-to-be mother-in-law. So I'm very excited. I got them just the other day, so I haven't worn them yet, but I'm very excited to wear them. It's unfortunate these rhino, they're a bit upset that I'm talking about the oxpeckers and not more about them. Aren't they just the most magnificent, majestic creatures? Just so unusual, like the modern day or real life unicorn, their massive horns on their faces. So Sia is asking why they're called white when they're actually grey. So that's a good question, Sia. So the reason being that the word white actually comes from the word weit, which means wide in Dutch or Afrikaans. And so when the Dutch settlers first described the white rhino, they referred to it, or it is believed that they referred to these rhinos as weit rhinos. So, and that refers to the fact that their mouths are much wider than that of a black rhino, and perhaps maybe it's because they're wider than the black rhino. So it's basically just a corruption of another word, the Dutch word. So yeah, unfortunately the name has stuck, or fortunately, but now they're known as white rhino. And you can see the ears sort of silhouetted over there on the right of that younger rhino to the right. And you can see they've got like a pointy tip to their ears. And they've also got a bit of like a tuft of hair at the tip of their ears. And so that is one way you can sort of distinguish between a white and a black rhino. So the black rhino have rounder ears, and they don't have those tufts, or they don't have that pointy tip. So let's see what's happening at Meno Okwena. Oh, isn't that just wonderful? Some kudu bulls, 3 kudu bulls over here in picture. And they're one of my favorite animals. Aren't they just beautiful? Just so elegant and graceful, the way they move. They seem so wise, with their sort of Gandalf-like beards hanging from their necks, like the wizards of the bushveld. It's also quite interesting that white mark on their face, which we call a chevron, and that's also part of the supposed strategy of the kudu to break up its shape or form. So when they're in the bush, behind many bushes or trees, their form or their sort of shape gets broken up by these lines along the flank, along the side. As you can see in this one in the front here, there's very faint sort of white stripes going along the side, and then also you have, as I mentioned, the chevron on the face. So that sort of just breaks up the shape, and so it becomes a bit more difficult for predators to distinguish or to sort of target one specific kudu. And it also makes them very camouflaged in the bush. I wonder what spooked them now. So I'm struggling to hear the audio, but maybe something has alarmed them, so they don't feel too comfortable to carry on drinking. Oop. Look at that sidestep. Even though they are very large and they move so gracefully, they can also move very quickly if needed. So Alicia is asking whether that sort of beard on the neck of the kudu, whether it's an attraction thing or camouflage. And I would say it's actually more of an attraction thing. So it's more to attract females. So the larger that sort of beard or tuft of hair, the more attractive the males become to the females. So much like us humans, if you have a big impressive beard, the ladies seem to love that. So, or perhaps you disagree, but it is, especially in humans, a beard in males is an indication, like a very thick, big beard is an indication of high levels of testosterone. So, so yeah, ladies, look out for those bearded men with bald heads. It's also another indication that a male has high levels of testosterone if they lose their hair quite young. So yeah, to answer your question, Lisha, it's more of an attraction thing, but it can also be used as camouflage. It depends how you look at it, but us humans can only theorize as to what the actual use is, but that's all we can do is we create these hypotheses, and then we try and test these hypotheses, but I guess, and then we just sort of fit the best hypotheses to what it's actually used for, based on our results. So yeah, I guess we'll only ever know if we could speak to the kudu. So, but I just love them. They're just so beautiful. So please do remember to keep those questions and comments coming. I would definitely still love to hear what else you bring with you when you go to the bush, when you go on a hike or camping. What is that essential item that you just can't go without? Okay, let's go back to Kenya, to Old Donya. It sounds so weird saying that, just teleporting from one destination to the next. Such an amazing concept. Okay, so now we've got a couple more giraffe than we had earlier. I spoke too soon. They seem to not want too much attention today. Either using their tails to swat away the flies. So I had a question earlier about how I could tell the difference between the male and the female giraffe, how I could sort of immediately tell the difference. And so that was, the question was by Sim. Sorry, I just had to quickly check who asked the question. But so Sim, if you're still watching, the giraffe, they have these what looks like horns on their heads, but which are actually called ossicones. And so they're basically like how would you say, sort of a growth from the skull. So it's actually part of the skull. So it's ossified cartilage. So when the giraffe is born, it's actually made of cartilage, these sort of horns, and then as they grow older, it ossifies, so it basically becomes bone. And so it's different to antlers and to horns, which you find on deer and antelope, because it's part of the skull. It's like sort of it's part of the skull, the bony structure of the skull, whereas the horns are more sort of like a sort of a growth like you'd have on your fingernails. So it's actually more like hair. So it's just keratin, which is also hardened. But anyways, to cut a long story short, the ossicones on the male is much larger, so they're much thicker, and they lack the tufts on the top of the ossicones in the males, because they use those ossicones in fighting, and when that impact of hitting another giraffe with those horns causes that tuft of hair to sort of fall away, or sort of to be pulled out, those tufts of hair. So they need to be much thicker and stronger for the males to fight. So giraffe aren't territorial, but they do fight for females. So Oba is asking what the best fire starter is for wet areas. That's a very interesting question. So I'm assuming you mean something that you can find in nature. So I think probably sickle bush is something that's quite common, which you find all around the sort of African bush, especially in the Lowveld region of South Africa. And so that wood burns very well. So maybe if you get some of the thinner branches, the sort of twigs of the sickle bush, but obviously being careful not to prick yourself with the very sharp spines of the sickle bush. But yes, I think I would probably resort to that, and maybe some. Unfortunately, you can't use grass in a very wet area because it would obviously be wet. But yeah, maybe you could use. There's some moss and tinder fungus which one could use, but it all depends on the area in which you live. So I know here where I stay in the Western Cape, there's the bushes over here are very flammable. So especially the sugar bush, which is a type of sort of protea, it is highly flammable. So it's excellent if you try it out and use it for firewood or a fire starter. So I had a question earlier from Zuri asking what's the must-have snack for blood sugar dips. So I'd imagine probably some dried mango, which is quite. So there's a lot of mango, at least in the low veld, or lots of people that grow mango, even sort of as a subsistence farmer. So definitely there's lots of mangoes about, and I think it's quite a nice snack to have if you can dry it out. I love mangoes. I think it's such a fantastic fruit, and it's very versatile. You can use it in lots of dishes and that. So I think let's have a look at what's happening at Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. Isn't that just adorable? There's a couple of baby warthogs busy suckling on the teat of the mother warthog. The mother must be careful not to stamp on her babies. But they are super cute. Super intelligent, as most members of the swine family are. You can see these warthog busy feeding, busy grazing, eating some grass. And so they have quite a range of things which they eat, quite a diverse set of food. And so they will eat almost any sort of vegetation that's available. So they eat grass, they eat fruits that have fallen from trees. That of course is a delicacy. The marula fruit, when they fall down in sort of January, February, March, in the low veld, and so you'll see many warthog hanging around underneath marula trees, waiting for those marulas to fall, or eating the ones that have already fallen. And they like to dig up tubers and roots, which often have a lot of nutrients and minerals in them. So Amara is asking, can piglets outrun cheetahs and zigzags? And unfortunately not. So cheetahs are incredibly fast, the fastest land mammal. So they can reach speeds of up to 112 kilometers per hour. And they're also very good at zigzagging, but not always quite as good as their prey. But I think a piglet probably wouldn't stand a chance. Look how cute that one is, just scurrying about there, scampering into the bush there. I don't know if you can see, but the little babies, little piglets, they've got this sort of white tuft of hair on the side of their faces, which just kind of like mimics the tusks of the adults. So it makes them look a bit more intimidating than what they actually are. So, Mara, I hope that answers your question. The piglets definitely wouldn't stand a chance, but maybe an adult warthog would be able to sidestep fast enough and get to one of their burrows fast enough. They don't like to travel too far away from their burrows if they can avoid it. They're fondly known as the bushveld antennas because when they feel threatened, they'll scurry away with their tails pointed towards the sky. And when there's tall grass, all you see is just this little tail sticking out of the grass and moving around. And so it's one of the reasons they're known as the bushveld antenna. I'd be interested to know who of you have been to Victoria Falls. It's definitely high up on my bucket list, but I would definitely, given the opportunity, love to visit Victoria Falls. But I'd imagine one thing that I'd definitely have to pack is bug spray, because I believe the mosquitoes can be quite horrendous over there with all that water, all the other bugs that come with lots of water. Okay, let's see if we can see some white rhino again there at Mantis Founders Lodge. Oh, beautiful. Just beautiful. So sad that these wonderful pachyderms are being persecuted for their horns.
Oh, wow. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Wow, that's amazing, everybody.
many game reserves. Definitely one of the sort of best strategies, or the most revolutionary strategies of late, has been using anti-poaching dogs. And so they are very, very skilled, these dogs, and very well trained, and they're able to pick up on scents, and they can hear things which humans can't. So I'm not sure entirely of how much stronger the dog scent is compared to humans, but I think it's 100 times more powerful than our noses. So they pick up on the scents of the rhinos in order to sort of track the rhinos, to protect them, and they also are able to smell. They can pick up on the scent of the poachers, so it becomes easier to track the poachers and to arrest them. And so yes, they also used in the war against pangolin poaching and bushmeat poaching, which is probably one of the lesser talked about sort of illegal hunting strategies, which so unfortunately many of these game reserves get targeted by bushmeat poachers. So they target antelope species, impalas, wildebeest, zebra, and so they put out snares, which is a very inhumane way of killing the animals, and they sort of, it's basically just a wire which they use to form a sort of noose, so that when the animal puts its foot in it, then it gets, and it tries to get away, then it sort of wraps around tighter and tighter, which then ends up either killing the animal or making them lose a limb or a body part. Okay, so let's have a look at what's happening at Old Donyo. Maybe there's some more entertainment over there. Okay, it looks like we've got a nice close-up of some giraffe over here. So unfortunately, you can't see Kilimanjaro in the background today because it's slightly overcast. But it's partly sunny there at Old Donyo today, and a high of 26 degrees Celsius and a low of 17 degrees. A nice day there in Kenya for, especially Old Donyo, for game viewing. That sun isn't beating down on you and it's a little bit cooler. But of course, the animals aren't very likely to visit waterholes on the cooler days, because there's less of a need for them to cool themselves off with wallowing or with spraying themselves with water. So sorry, I've been talking so much that I haven't been seeing some of your questions, but so let me start with Kale asking what conservation issues affect giraffes most. So I'd imagine habitat loss would be sort of the biggest issue, because they have to compete obviously with humans for natural resources, for trees and for space. And so unfortunately, with the growing population of humans, we require more wood for fires, for cooking, and for furniture, and for all sorts of things. And so in many African countries, it's still wood. Wood burning is the sort of only way people can afford to cook their food. So many people don't have access to trees in the areas where they live, so then they have to go and cut down trees in game reserves. So that's also another issue, is that sometimes trees also get poached. But yes, I would definitely say that the habitat loss, the loss of space for these giraffes, and habitat fragmentation. So you have these small reserves, but they're not interconnected. So there's not much sort of gene flow, or there's not a lot of mixing of genes happening. So there's quite a bit of inbreeding that happens, and yeah, so it's one of the issues. They do get hunted, but it's I wouldn't say that it's one of the biggest conservation issues. I do know about some incidences where a giraffe have been shocked by low-hanging electric wires, because obviously they're very long and sometimes they don't see the wire in front of them, and so they end up shocking themselves. So I have seen that before, and so yeah, it's a very sad sight to see when it's a very avoidable death. But yeah, so those are some conservation concerns. On some reserves, there's still quite a bit of electric wires which hang quite low. Yeah, so I'm not aware of giraffe being poached so much for their meat, but I imagine there would be plenty of meat to be eaten if one of these beautiful creatures gets poached. So I'd imagine the meat would probably be very tough, because they're very muscular. They've got a very muscular body and legs to keep all that, or to move all that weight. So Isha is asking, how do giraffes use their lips to eat? So they use their lips in combination with their prehensile tongues. So prehensile just meaning that they're able to wrap their tongues around a a branch, for example, and then they sort of use those lips, the upper lip being also slightly prehensile, and they sort of pull with their lips and the tongue the tiny leaves which are found on most acacias. So they don't just use their lips, but they can sometimes, if they're picking at tiny leaves, they will use their narrow muzzles in order to pick at, and their lips in order to pick the tiny leaves and flowers and pods of some trees. Oh, look at this. This giraffe is just full of all these oxpeckers. Must have a lot of ticks. Definitely those birds are loving that female in picture. Almost more oxpecker than there is giraffe. Yeah, they're all pecking away viciously at the skin of the hair of the giraffe. And sometimes they can pick a bit too hard or peck a bit too hard around wounds, and they can actually prevent the wounds of these animals from healing. So as good as they are at keeping the giraffe and other animals clean, they can also be quite harmful. So I see Ibu has just asked the question, do oxpeckers harm their host animals? And so yes, I think I've answered that question now. So when they do have a big wound and there's a lot of parasites that are attracted by that wound or attracted towards the wound, then it obviously would then attract a lot of oxpeckers. So then they peck at that wound and they prevent it from healing. So yes, they can harm their hosts. And so if the wound can't heal, then it can cause infection for the host, for the giraffe, for example. So Zuri is asking, what sounds do giraffe make in the wild? And so it's many people believe that they don't make any sounds, but they do make sort of low vocalizations, which is inaudible to most humans. But we just can't obviously hear these sounds. But sometimes when you're in the bush and you notice a giraffe standing still and just sort of looking like it's having an existential crisis, just sort of looking in one direction for a very long time, it might be alerting other animals to danger, to maybe a leopard or a lion. So it's always a nice indication for a guide to look at a giraffe and see if they're sort of sedentary and just looking in one direction for a very long time. So they almost also act as a sort of an alarm system in their own right. Such a beautiful picture. Beautiful blue skies and big white fluffy clouds in the background with these towering figures in the foreground. And just incredible that such a creature even exists. And so their closest relative is a okapi, which has also got quite a long neck. There's also a ruminant. And they can be found in the rainforests of Central Africa, the okapi. And they were only discovered much later in human history, or they were only recorded, let's say, much late or quite recently. But let's see what's happening at the hive. Let's if there's some interesting things to see. Beautiful. Okay, looks like we've got some marabou storks and a heron in picture, a grey heron. So the marabou storks unfortunately fall under the ugly five. So you have obviously the big five, which most people are familiar with, and then you have the little five, which is basically all the little creatures which share the name with the big five members. And then you have the shy five, and you also have the big six birds, which you find in the Kruger National Park. But this bird has got the unfortunate label of being part of the ugly five, and it shares this title along with the spotted hyena, the vultures, and blue wildebeest, and also warthog, which I think is quite unfortunate. But yeah, these birds have not been blessed with looks. Let's just put it that way. Tony says the marabou storks look like hang gliders with bad hair. I think that's probably the best description I've heard of a marabou stork. So thank you, Tony, for providing that bit of humor for us there. Now they definitely were not blessed with a full head of hair, and so this could probably be due to their diet. So a lot of the time you'll see them around a carcass, so they definitely like to scavenge on sort of big carcasses of, let's say, a buffalo or a giraffe or a zebra. So you'll find them along with the vultures at carcasses, and they perhaps the fact that they don't have many feathers around their heads and their necks is due to them having to stick their heads into carcasses, and so they don't have feathers and that on their heads or their necks, then it's less of a chance of the blood and all sorts of diseases and that getting stuck in between their feathers, and so it's more like a preventative measure so that they don't carry diseases, or they don't get any of the diseases which could be carried by the carcass. So Dana is asking do marabou storks hunt live prey or only scavenge? So it would be sort of hybrid. They are opportunistic. So if a frog perhaps is chilling close to the waterhole or to a river, they definitely won't miss an opportunity to snatch up a frog or some other prey. But yeah, they tend to be seen scavenging a lot more than actually hunting. But definitely they do hunt. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Dana. So Sia is asking, what is the average lifespan of a marabou stork? And so I had to look that up, to be honest. It's typically 25 to 30 years, and it says that in captivity they can live up to 50 years with proper care. So that is quite a long lifespan for a bird. So I imagine that they gives them plenty of time to get quite big. I see here we've got some hooded vultures in picture. I can make out on the left some hooded vultures. And how I can tell is that they've got a tiny head compared to, and a tinier beak compared to the white-backed vulture or the lappet-faced vulture. Trying to make out what the other birds are. It doesn't look like they're all hooded vultures. Maybe there's some. But there you can see quite clearly on the left, to the bottom left, that sort of very small hooked beak, which is used for tearing flesh. And typically, at a carcass, you'll see them only in the later stages of the sort of progression of the different animals that come to visit a carcass after it's or after the animal has died. So typically, you'll see the lappet-faced vultures and the white-backed vultures first, because they've got the thicker beaks and they're able to access bigger chunks of meat and tear through the hide, whereas the lappet-faced vulture has got a much narrower beak, but also a very sharp beak for picking at or pecking at the smaller chunks of flesh. So Ebo is asking, how do hooded vultures compete with larger vultures? And as I mentioned, they don't really compete. They sort of have a different niche to the larger vultures. As I mentioned, their beaks are better suited for the smaller pieces of flesh, which are more difficult to get to on the carcass. And so they'll wait for the larger vultures to leave before they end up feasting on the carcass. So Tia is asking, do hooded vultures help control disease spread? And most certainly they do. So of course, if a carcass is sort of left in a field to sort of decay, it creates a sort of an ideal sort of habitat for many diseases and things to form. And so with the vultures, they play a very important role in sort of making sure that meat doesn't stay there for very long or doesn't fester any diseases and that. So they're very important in cleaning up the environment. And you can imagine also the meat from the carcass attracts a lot of flies and other parasites and things, and so they also carry a lot of diseases. So definitely very important in controlling the spread of diseases. So Pendo was asking, can marabou storks walk long distances on the ground? And yes, they do sometimes, if required, when they're looking out for a meal, an opportunistic meal, they'll walk several kilometers, so perhaps up to 10 kilometers in a day. But typically they would soar around looking for a carcass, maybe also using the vultures with their excellent eyesight to give them an indication of where a carcass might be.
Hello, I'm James Hendry, and I'd like to take you on a very different kind of safari through the wild heart of Madagascar. In Undersibe, we'll track the Indri's eerie call through misty rainforest. Then it's east on to Masuala, where lemurs leap through the jungle, coral reefs glow beneath the waves, and adventure waits around every bend. Come, let's explore it together.
Oh, even a hyena coming into the action as well now. Oh my word! She's stalking the hyena now. Leopard, hyena, lion, all together in one shot. Oh! Woo! This is action-packed.
Real, you say the best kind of roadblock? Absolutely. Look at this.
Hello, girls.
If you love watching Wild Earth, here's a little tip. become a member. You can gain access to the channel ad-free, you can rewind and re-watch sightings, and you can join our Tuesday live safaris. There's also behind the scenes videos, fireside chats, and every Safari Live episode, whenever you want it. It's just a better way to stay connected to nature.
Are very vocal and very common throughout South Africa. Wherever you find water, you'll definitely most likely find some Egyptian geese. And so you can actually tell the difference between the male and the female by listening to their calls or the voices of them. The male has a much raspier voice, and the female has more sort of, it's a louder vocalization. You can see lots of elephant dung scattered around the edge of the waterhole. I can see some of it basically sort of teetering on the edge of the water there. And I imagine sometimes the elephants, they do poop in the waterholes. You can see a bit of rain as well. It looks like it's busy dripping a little bit over there at Tembe. It's quite a cool day by Tembe standards. It's only 19 degrees Celsius and it's mostly cloudy there today. It does look like there's a bit of drizzle, but maybe that's just my eyes deceiving me. So what's interesting about these Egyptian geese or the Egyptian goose is that it's not actually a goose, but it's in fact a duck, and it's closely related to the shell ducks, which are also not entirely true ducks, but they are kind of like sort of a hybrid between a duck and a goose. So so the name is actually quite deceiving. Okay, let's have a look at what's happening at Aldonja Lodge. Leave these Egyptian geese in to peck away at the ground. Oh, okay. So we've got a nice journey of giraffes over here. There's a collective noun for giraffes. Looks like they're practicing a bit of caution before drinking. A lot of them sort of just checking around, looking around before putting their heads down to drink. Of course, they're very vulnerable when they're in this position. So Django was asking, do Egyptian geese migrate long distances? So they are able to move from waterhole to waterhole, but they're mostly sedentary, so they do not migrate as much. They don't travel great distances. So they sort of remain in areas where there's water throughout the year, or they'll go to areas with a bit more water, but they don't travel great distances. And then so Kwame was asking what predators target Egyptian geese eggs. And so I imagine water monitor lizards, those big lizards which you find close to waterholes. They love eggs. So eggs is quite a delicacy for them. So they would definitely target the Egyptian geese eggs. And perhaps crocodiles might also, although it wouldn't be a very substantial meal for crocodile, but maybe jackals, maybe other birds like African harrier hawk or a gymnogene. They also love eggs. Or maybe even a python, a rock python, which they also tend to love eggs. Or some other snakes. There you can see them bending down for a drink, and like my colleague Sean described, it's like they look like a tripod, like sort of a tripod for a camera or something. They do look very silly when they're kneeling down to drink water. So please do keep those questions and comments coming. I do love to hear from you, and I still want to hear what the rest of you would take with you into the bush. Like, what is your sort of go-to? Is there a particular book which you always take with you? Is there a field guide? Like, do you always take a tree guide with you, or a bird guide? I know my bird app has proven incredibly useful because it works offline, so it's just like having a book on my phone, so it's a lot more practical to take with me into the bush. And it's been incredibly useful in also identifying the calls of birds. So I'd definitely say my birding app is definitely up there with something I would not go to the bush without. And then, of course, accompanying that would be a good pair of binoculars. And unfortunately, I don't own a very good pair of binoculars, but I do own a couple of pairs. But definitely on my wish list would be a very strong pair of binoculars, especially being a bird nerd like myself. It becomes very difficult to identify the LBJs, the little brown jobs, if you don't have a good pair of binoculars. And then, of course, obviously to see all the other creatures from a distance in the bush. Nice to see when you have even a giraffe, for example. You just use your binoculars to have a close look at the patterns of the giraffe, or of the ossicones or the lashes, because they've got these incredibly long and beautiful lashes, which are the envy of many models. But those lashes are used to protect their eyes against the leaves and the thorns and that the trees which they browse on. So Bernard Dibwe is asking, why do the giraffe look so worried? And perhaps there is, maybe they can smell something nearby. Maybe they can pick up on the scent of a lion. They do have a much better developed sense of smell than we do, and their eyesight is also much better than ours, and they've got a higher vantage point from which to look. So yeah, maybe they're seeing something. Maybe there's like a lion which they can smell or can see in the distance. So they're just being a bit cautious of that. So Chulu Manko says, I always take a well-stocked cooler box with me. So yeah, that's also definitely one way of experiencing the bush, and to go camping is with a well-stocked cooler box. And obviously you can decide what you want to put in that cooler box, but yeah, it would definitely be a shame to go anywhere without a nice cold beverage to enjoy the heat of the African sun. So what's also quite interesting about the giraffe is that you see with the males, you can see the males on the right. The two on the right, they have the much thicker ossicones and as I mentioned earlier. They also have this sort of like median horn, so it's like a big bump in between their eyes and just below the ossicones. You can kind of see it quite well there, like silhouetted over there to the right. So that is much bigger in males, and so that also gives them a bit of protection, the male's protection when they're fighting, to protect their sort of their brains and all the other sort of things within the skull, and protect their eyes. And of course the females don't really need that median horn, because they don't need to fight as much. They only have to really fend off some prey, perhaps. Okay, let's see what's happening at Mantis Founders Lodge. Let's see if we've got another look at that, those white rhinos. Oh, look at this beautiful, beautiful, it looks like a male in picture over here. You can see his penis sheath over there. So he looks quite grumpy. I don't know what annoyed him or aggravated him. Maybe he's just being territorial and busy sort of throwing his weight around. So Ibu is asking, how do rhinos mark their territories? And so that's a good question. So what they do is sometimes they scrape the ground with their hind feet or their hind legs. Excuse me. And so then they also urinate onto the soil and then sort of scrape the ground with their hind feet, so to sort of make sure that that scent sort of stays in the soil and like mixes well with the soil particles. And they also have middens, so they have areas where they okay, you see there's a perfect example. So you see how it's spraying its urine there, and then perhaps it will scrape the ground a bit to just rub that scent in. And now he's smelling his own pee, which is quite unusual for humans to see. If you acted like that in public, people might think you're a bit weird, but it seems to be okay for the rhino. So as I was mentioning, the middens, they have areas which is kind of like a toilet for the rhinos. They basically poop onto a pile of existing poop, and so it becomes like a large pile of poop, which is sort of a marker of the rhino's territory. So they'll have many of these middens scattered throughout their territory, and so these act as kind of like beacons of information. So any other rhinos venturing into the territory will pick up on the scent of that rhino. Perhaps they'll know not to enter that territory because it's the male of that particular rhino has lots of testosterone, so it's unlikely that they would take on that particular territory for that rhino. So yeah, poop is actually very incredibly useful for animals, and only recently humans have started to realize the potential of researching poop, because many hormones get excreted out into the dung of animals, into the feces. So you're able to sort of monitor cortisol levels, so stress hormone levels, and as I mentioned, testosterone and estrogen. So you can study poop as a sort of non-invasive way of researching animals and their behavior. You can tell whether an animal is stressed in its environment, or so that could lead you to some more investigation as to what is stressing the animal out. So there's lots of interesting uses for poop, and we've only sort of brushed the surface of the potential of that research. So Aisha is asking, what are the 5 main rhino species worldwide? So in Africa we get the black and the white rhino. The white rhino population being much larger than the black rhino population. And then in Asia you get the Indian rhino, or the greater one-horned rhino. And you get the Javan rhino and then the Sumatran rhino. So the ones that we see on the show are, of course, only black and white rhino. And as I was mentioning earlier, there are a couple of ways that you can tell the difference between the two. But the white rhino is much larger, can almost be double the size of the black rhino sometimes. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, you can look at the ears. The white rhino has kind of like a pointy tip to its ear, and it's got like sort of a white tuft on the top there by the tip. And so the black rhinos, they've got a much sort of rounded earlobe, and they don't have that tuft on the top of the ear. And also with the white rhino, you can tell also that this is a white rhino by looking at Sorry, I had a bit of a technical issue there for a second. So the white rhino, as you can see that front horn is quite a bit longer than the horn at the back. And so with the white rhino, the front horn will always be longer than the back horn. And with black rhino, the horns can be the same length. So the front and the back can be the same length. So it's not necessarily that the back horn is shorter than the front horn. And then there's also, as I was mentioning, the head sort of droops down with the white rhino because they're grazers, so they need their lips to be close to the ground in order for them to eat the grass, whereas the black rhino, the heads are positioned much higher, so the heads don't droop to the ground like the white rhinos does. Because the black rhino feeds on leaves and branches and flowers and that of trees, so they're browsers. Okay, seeing as this white rhino over here doesn't want to cooperate with us, let's go back to old Donyo. For a moment there I thought the image froze because these giraffe were standing so still. I can also see that giraffe lying down or like sort of resting there in the background, just to the left of that umbrella thorn, which is in between those two giraffe there in the background. And so many times I get asked the question, how do giraffes sleep, or do they sleep? And so there's a perfect example of a giraffe lying down and resting. So they don't often let their necks lie flat on the ground because of their extremely high blood pressure. They have the highest blood pressure of all the land mammals. And they also have the largest heart relative to their body size compared to any other land mammals. And this is of course to pump that blood in against gravity to their brains and to all the extremities of their body. And so in a fully matured giraffe, you'll find that the hearts can weigh up to 15 kilograms. So Nuru is asking, Ulla is asking, what role do giraffes play in seed dispersal? And they play an important role, a very important role in seed dispersal, because they feed on the pods of many acacias, and therefore the sort of semi-digested pod ends up passing through their gut, or should I say the partially digested seed of the pods. They end up in the poop, partially digested and in a perfect little microclimate for the seed to grow, the seed to germinate. And obviously the giraffe, they travel great distances, so they can travel easily 15 kilometers or more within a day. So they would then transport that seed into all the different parts of the game reserve, and ensuring that the seed gets well dispersed throughout the savanna. So Ulu is asking, do you need a field guide, book or app? So Ulu, I think if you are looking to identify the different animals, definitely depending on what you're more interested in. I'm obviously very interested in birds, and I obviously love my mammals too, and so I love to keep these field guides with me. If I have to spot an animal which I don't know much about, or if I'm not able to identify an animal or a bird, so it's very useful in that regard. But it depends on your intentions of visiting the bush. I obviously love to identify everything and to learn about all the different animals and birds. And so yeah, if you're just going to the bush to just appreciate the wildlife and not putting a label on everything, then I wouldn't say it's necessary or needed. But if you're a bit of a nature nerd like me, then you'll find it very useful.
What does it take to handle the wild? Balance. Determination. Focus.
Yaku!
And gear that can take a beating so you don't have to.
coast that we're approaching now.
The light on her as well is absolutely gorgeous.
So we are going to enjoy the rest of this sunset.
Wow, 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 this is absolutely crazy.
And thank you for joining us. For myself and Cam, we will see you next time.
On this beautiful day in Oldonyo, and let's wrap to our next destination. Oh, so now we're at Simbavati waterside in the Klasiri. It was also part of the Greater Kruger National Park. We've got a little terrapin over here in picture. Oops, okay, there he goes. There's a marsh terrapin. So not to be confused with a turtle or a tortoise. But they are sort of the freshwater version of a turtle, you could say. But unlike tortoises or turtles, they're omnivores. So your tortoises are herbivores, and then you get your turtles, which are mainly carnivores. So yeah, that's one of the ways that a terrapin is different to a tortoise or a turtle. Can't quite see what bird we have in picture here, but it's a bit pixelated. Maybe a swallow of some sort. I honestly can't tell what it is for the life of me. I can see it's kind of like a rufous, got a rufous coloring on its head and towards the tail, and it looks sort of black on the wings, but I'm not entirely sure. Oh, there it goes. Okay, let's end off at Founder's Lodge. Let's see what's happening over there. Okay, let's end the show off with the beautiful visual close to Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape. The lovely white rhino and the zebras and the blessed book in the background. I'll just, as we're wrapping up, I'd just like to thank you all for joining me today, and the rest of the Wild Earth crew. And it was a very fun show, and hopefully you learned something. I definitely learned quite a few things from you. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday wherever you are, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.